Who is the most underrated actor of all time?
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Correct. Why?
Well, because of his spiky hair, and
Yep.
his ice-cold demeanor, and his big muscles.
Absolutely.
I must break you. The guilty will be punished.
My name is Sergeant Andrew Scott.
Come on, guys, don't do this. If I don't get breakfast, I get real grumpy. I don't think you like me grumpy.
And you go in pieces, asshole.
Let's kick some ass.
Hello and welcome back to I Must Break, this podcast, the fan podcast celebrating the cinematic career of Dolph Lundgren. Today, we're going back to World War II once again, this time chatting about two films, both filmed in 2021, Operation Seawolf and Come Out Fighting. Written and directed by Stephen Luke and filmed back-to-back, both films have Dolph taking on commander roles, in which he leads two groups of men through specific battles in World War II. I'm your host, Sean, and joining me to discuss both of these films today is Steve Doan, fan of both Dolph and apparently this show. Steve, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, the pleasure's all mine, Sean. As I say, it's a real honor.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is kind of cool. This is like, I guess it's fair to say you're the first fan of the show who's reached out to me. How long have you been listening, if you don't mind me asking?
I discovered the show must be just over a year ago. I can't even remember how. It must have just cropped up in my feed. It was the Skin Trade episode.
Okay.
Which was one of my favourite Dolph films anyway. And then from there, I've kept up with the new shows and I've gone back and I think I've listened to, if not all of them, certainly the vast majority by this point, yeah.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I guess that's an excellent segue because I'm curious. You're obviously a huge fan of action cinema. Your experience with Mr. Dolph Lundgren over the years.
Well, I suppose like most people, I discovered Mr. Lundgren. It was 1986 when Rocky came out in Britain. We used to get the films a little bit later than yourselves, or Rocky 4, I should say. And I remember I was at my nan's. It always sticks in my mind, just visiting. And my uncle comes to see his mum. He's on his way to the pictures. Do you fancy coming to see Rocky 4? So, yeah, obviously. And I was just blown away. Who's this huge guy? He seems unbeatable. I think I was rooting for Dolph by the end. He just... that's what you like when you're 11 years old, isn't it? So, and from there, I've just followed his career ever since. I think I've seen just about all of his films and stuck with him through thick and thin. In fact, I'm such a fan. I've even got a bathrobe here of the Drago character. It was a Christmas present off my wife a while ago, but unfortunately, in terms of the Expendables, I'm more Jet Li size than Dolph Lundgren size. And it was one size fits all, so I look like a child wearing it, but I do love putting it on and pretending I'm about to do some destruction to Apollo Creed. Oh,
very cool. Well, I mean, if anything, your nickname could be Happy Feet, because isn't that what Lundgren calls Jet Li in Expendables before they throw down? So,
that's right, yeah.
Well, I guess I'm curious because we're at a very interesting period and crossroads in the career of Mr. Lundgren. I'm curious, before we get into these particular films, what is your take on his current efforts of the last 5 years? Because there have been some, let's be honest, there's been a couple hits, I guess you can say, being Skin Trade, Creed 2, obviously, but then there've been a lot of misses, I think it's fair to say, and a lot of films that are purely paychecks, and I think those are pretty evident very, very clearly from the offset. What is your opinion on what he's been putting out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a fan, you wish well for them, but it does seem there's been a lot more misses than hits the last few years, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
it's a shame to see these stars like Dolph and like Bruce Willis before him, where you see them on the cover of the DVD or you see them on the streaming service, and you know going in it's a 3 day, 4 days on set for them, and they're going to try and stretch that out. That was one of the nice things about Operation Seawolf. While it was by no means the best film you'll ever see, we got plenty of Dolph in this one.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you've caught it yet. I took the family to see Aquaman 2 last night. Dolph gets $6 billion in that, and even though it's not a film I'll probably watch again, but it was nice to see him on a big screen as opposed to in a cheap production. And I know Dolph doesn't need my good wishes. Obviously, I'm sure he'll earn more next year, whatever he does, than I'll earn in the next 10. But it was just nice to go and sit and watch a big screen and see Mr. Lundgren giving a performance on it.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward. I as of this recording, excuse me, I have not seen Aquaman 2 yet, or Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. That's something I was talking about with a buddy actually a couple weeks ago. That's something that's kind of gone by the wayside, if you think about it, are the numbers in sequels. Nowadays, sequels are just, they might as well just be chapters or whatever. So it's not Aquaman 2, it is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Okay. But for all intents and purposes, it is Aquaman 2. But from what I understand, I guess Dolph, I mean, that was my fear with the film, is I was thinking, like, he really wasn't in the first one that much. He's probably not going to be in the next one, but I guess he does actually get more than you would think in the new one. Is that right?
Yeah. As I said, I think he was $6 billion in the film. I mean, obviously it's pretty much all Jason Momoa throughout. But yeah, Dolph does get into a little bit of the action. He's there in the background for a few scenes. And although I've not seen the first Aquaman since it was released, I would say he has a little bit more to do in this one.
Okay, cool. Well, let's look at these two particular films. This is the, I want to say, I think it's the fourth of the combo episodes that I've been doing of the show. This particular pairing makes the most sense, in my opinion. And I guess before we get in these films, I have to ask you another question, because I'm legitimately, honestly curious about this. Okay, in terms of epic war films, because obviously, okay, I'm I'm in America here. You're across the pond in England. I'm curious, how do like these epic war films, especially centered around World War II, play over there? Because they have a very interesting niche over here, but I'm curious, over there, do they still get a lot of promotion, and is there still a big market for them?
I think there's a big market for a big budget film. If you was to put out a Saving Private Ryan, it will play as well over here, I would imagine, as it plays your side of the water. Obviously, this level of production that we're discussing today, I think apart from yourself, I've not spoken to anyone that's seen these films. They tend to sit on the bottom shelf of the local supermarket in the bargain basement, but I've yet to see anyone pick them up. But yeah, the epic, like your Christopher Nolan type of production. I mean, I'm aware they were World War I, not World War II, but yeah, they play well over here.
Interesting. I'm just wondering, like, who these particular films were for. I mean, because let's be honest, both of these films were filmed on like barely even a tenth of the budget of what Dunkirk got, or whatever it may be. Yeah. But I'm just wondering, like, who are these particular movies for? I mean, because if you really think about it, and this is really kind of sad to say and admit, I mean, but we're starting to kind of lose our veterans from World War II. We're in this state right now where we don't really have too many World War II veterans left. And so it's just kind of puzzling that we're still getting, regardless if it's a huge, big budget production or if it's on a much, much smaller scale, like these two particular films, it's still kind of puzzling that in 2023, we're still getting films about World War II. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's because the stage those films play out on, almost like a medieval or a Western, it just gives it's that it can be epic. It just gives you a different playground to put your characters in. But as you say, I know the younger generation, my children, they're maybe a little bit young for a lot of Dolph's films anyway. But I think I'd have a far easier time getting them to watch something like a Universal Soldier or a Dark Angel, something a little bit more contemporary, than I would saying, let's watch a film with tanks set in the 1940s. I think they'd... In fact, I did get my son to watch one of his more recent ones last year when he was sick off school. It was about this time of year. We watched Pups Alone, and his response was, "Yeah,
I'll go back to school."
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. He said, "I should have gone to school, Dad." So, it's a pity because, given a big budget, I think these films could attract an audience. A different cast, but a similar story. Even though we're in a time when there doesn't seem to be movie stars like there was when we were younger, it seems to be more the franchise than the actual person whose name's over the title. But I do believe that if we had a Leonardo DiCaprio in this film, there'd be a market for it. If it was Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington in Come Out Fighting, I think there'd be a market for it. But unfortunately, this level of budget films, I do think, is purely aimed at the likes of you and me, who are just fans of the actors involved, and they'll scrape enough money back from it, hopefully, to churn another low-budget one out in 6 months' time.
Well, that's actually one of my biggest issues with these particular films is that, and I've been saying this on the show numerous times, but they use the names, okay, the stars' names to sell each of these films. But then the names, the actors, by that I mean, never really gel together for a cohesive and complete film. If you look, that's what's really interesting is I was going to send you a screenshot actually, but if you look at the posters for both of these films and line them up side by side, they are identical. Okay, because you have Operation Seawolf, you have three of the stars, the three floating heads above, or at the top of the poster, and then underneath you have the title, and then underneath the title you have the a battle piece, right? Okay, and same thing with Come Out Fighting. You have the 5 names up at the top. Underneath it says Come Out Fighting, and then underneath you have like a battle scene, if that. Okay, and so you look at these films, and they do have really good casts. I think what's interesting is I wanted to I'll just say it right now, I wanted to Come Out Fighting more than Operation Seawolf, mainly because of the cast. Okay, because you look at the cast and it's like, man, that is a stacked cast, but the actors really never fully come together for a full-on team up. They just kind of float in, with long stretches where they're not there, but then they kind of pop in for a cameo and then they walk away. And let's face it, Steve, that's the current state of the market. And it really does harken back to the days of Canon. Okay. Where we're going to sell this film on the star's name alone because that star is a commodity. But then in the end, you're going to be duped. At this point, I'll be perfectly honest. I'm not. I'm privy to, I guess, the bait and switch to it all, but it's kind of a shame that there are still those who will fall for it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I fall for it every time, and I know what I'm getting. And it's a shame because if you look back even 10 years ago when Dolph was making films like One in the Chamber, they were a lower budget film then, but it looks like they've had time to put that film together. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever read any interviews with Scott Adkins, and he says it a lot. He says it's gone from 30 days to shoot a film to suddenly you've got 16, 17 days sometimes. The money's not there. And I suppose that's why a lot of the time you see actors in these films and it seems they're giving a poor performance compared to something where you've seen them as a supporting role in a bigger film. Because I suppose the director hasn't got time to go, let's try that again faster or do more of this, do more of that. I assume the director just says, you know what, you got your lines out, you hit your mark, that's great because we're going to go and blow something up now. We haven't got time to do that again. And
Yeah.
as I say, it's such a shame. It's a shame for the actors involved. It's certainly a shame for anyone that doesn't know what they're getting when they go into these films. But I'm a sucker. I fall for it every time, because if I see a film with Dolphin, I see Jean-Claude Van Damme in a film, I'm watching that because it's out of a sense of loyalty, I think, at this stage more than anything. I'm like a Labrador. I'm just loyal. I've followed these guys since the 80s, and I'm going to follow them all the way through.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Jean-Claude Van Damme is in an interesting situation. I've long been saying this as well. He has a couple on deck. He has one called Darkness of Man, and then supposedly he signed on for another. But he's at a state where he is content with almost a retirement, and he'll never really. It seems like, at least to me, it seems like Jean-Claude, he doesn't pop up for these type of films. And so I don't know what his finances are compared to the other guys. And I mean, the fact remains, maybe we could also say that Dolph just likes the art of acting and enjoys the art of acting maybe more than Jean-Claude does. But what's interesting is you don't see Jean-Claude starring in these types of films. Now, granted, he's done a couple within the past 10 years. He did a terrible one called Swelter, I remember. But you don't see him suiting up in a World War II uniform, standing by a tank for 3 days, and then his face is blasted all over the poster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think even going back to Swelter, I think Jean-Claude's films seem like they have a slightly higher budget, or maybe he just won't turn out for something too cheap. I think his legacy is possibly more important to him.
Yeah.
Which sounds like I'm throwing shade at Dolph there, and I'm not. I don't know his finances, and as you say, he may enjoy the art of acting more than Jean-Claude. It may just be a case of saying, if I do 5 films this year, one of them might just catch lightning in a bottle. That might be a great film despite its budgetary restrictions. But yeah, he does seem to be in a position where he's signing on for more. And as you say, I mean, Jean-Claude's latest, The Darkness of Man, it was initially due to come out last month. So I'm hoping that comes out soon and it doesn't go the way of Frenchie, his long-lost project I've been waiting 15 years, I think, now to see.
You mean The Eagle Path, or excuse me, Full Love, or I've kind of resigned myself with the fact that I may never see that particular film, which is very, very sad, because I mean it's hard to think that one went into production and started filming in 2007, and we are now in 2023, and it still has yet to see the light of day. I mean, that's a discussion for a whole other podcast. Yeah. But yeah, man, I don't know if we're ever going to see that one. I don't know.
I'm like you. I'd given up on it, and then I think about 12 months ago, there was talk of it going to a festival, I think in Berlin. And I thought, oh, great, this is going to be this year at last. And obviously, nothing seems to have come of it. But yeah, obviously that's a whole different conversation, isn't it? But what I think I'd like for Dolph that Jean-Claude had was after JCVD in 2008, suddenly people were saying, this guy can act, he's not just muscles. And I'd love for Dolph to get that recognition at some point, for casual critics to come forward and go, that was a role that showed us he could do something else. Mm-hmm. And as much as the likes of you and I have seen him play so many different characters, to general critics out there, he's just the guy in the background. He's just Ivan Drago. And I'd just love for him to get something he could sink his teeth into. A good, strong director, maybe not even an action role, but where somebody could say, yes, he deserves some respect.
Well, looking at these two particular films, I mean, interestingly, I mentioned how the posters are almost identical, but both of these films also clock in with the almost the exact same runtime, 1 hour and about 28 minutes. Pretty rare for a World War II set epic film. I'll put epic in quotes there. I should mention before we get into these films, I did speak with the writer and director, Stephen Luke, a couple years ago. Nice guy.
I wanted to like these films more than I did, having listened to that episode.
Yeah.
I almost felt guilty not enjoying them because, as you say, he just came across so well and so passionate and so knowledgeable on the subject.
Oh, yeah, and I will say with these films, you can tell that they were directed by someone, even though the films are a little lacking, I think, in terms of budget and just the overall execution. I mean, you can tell that they were made by someone who does have a passion for this particular era. When I spoke with Stephen Luke, I mean, yeah, like I said, really, really nice guy, huge history buff of the World War II era. I think it goes without saying, he has his own World War II prop company called Man the Line, which provides props and costumes and various materials to films, stage plays, high school productions, etc. So with these particular films, he's pulling multiple duties. He was the writer, director, producer, and I guess we can say prop master as well. So...
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously a jack of all trades, isn't he? And he's got. I think he's done well with no doubt limited resources, especially in Come Out Fighting. I did find myself thinking these must be the director's tanks because there's very little damage coming to them. There didn't seem to be any dirt really going on them. There was no squibs going off on the tanks. I thought, yes, he's taking care of these because he's probably harding them out for somebody else's film next week.
Well, the tanks are barely, if you notice, the tanks are really barely moving. They're just paperweights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so they're not only are they getting damaged, but they're really not moving. Like, you'll get the actors just kind of standing by them or kind of moving the turret around. But I mean, they're basically, yeah, like I said, they're paperweights. They don't even move.
Oh yeah. Again, you can see there's some talent there. There's a scene in. I'm jumping around now. You'll have to forgive me. There was a scene on the submarine with Dolph where they shoot him from above and he's about to have a drink. He doesn't take the drink. You can see the weight of the world on the man's shoulders. And I found myself thinking, yeah, this guy, he knows what he's doing. He's hampered by his budget, but there's some talent there. And I'd love to see Stephen Luke given the opportunity to have, okay, nobody's going to give him a $200 million budget, but the thought of him just getting $20, $30 million to work with, a longer shooting schedule, and just see what he could come up with. Yeah, I think we'd get something worthwhile.
Well, that's an excellent segue, actually. I mean, you mentioned the submarine. So let's get into Operation Seawolf first of this duo, okay? All right, so if we look at this particular film, Dolph plays Captain Hans Kessler, a German U-boat commander who leads a desperate attack on the U.S. as he and a crew of young German soldiers board a submarine known as the Seawolf in the final days of World War II.
What are my orders, Commander?
Operation Seawolf.
It's the American coast.
You will leave with 3 ships. 7 more will join you when you are out to sea. We shall equip these rockets to our U-boats and attack New York City. You will lead the pack.
Operation Seawolf is a go.
Who's this?
Senior Commander Heinrich Kessler, type to command this wolf pack.
He's a very dangerous man. Got nothing to lose.
Attention up!
You're wolves.
These are not wolves, but boys.
Are you prepared?
I'm confident under the circumstances.
Good luck, my friend.
You are my second in command. You must obey all my orders without question. Is that clear?
Yes, Captain.
The whole crew is on your side. Men like Kessler, their time is past.
U-578 has started to engage.
Who gave that order?
Sir, multiple ships coming in fast!
Battle stations.
Fire! Hit on 4!
Sir, a convoy was just hit. Looks like U-boats. I want all available forces on that spot. Nothing better than a wolf hunt.
Operation Teardrop is a go. They really going to let us hunt subs? Well, we are in the hunt.
Incoming! We need to dive now.
Prepare to dive.
You put the lives of this crew in danger. You must decide whose orders you follow. Dive!
Sir, something on sonar.
Launch hedgehogs!
They have just sunk 3 U-boats.
Pack!
There's more than one.
One could sneak through.
The U-boat's coming up alongside us, sir.
Get on the surface guns.
Blow it out of the water.
On the U-boat, every man decides his own fate.
I will say with this particular film, what's interesting is, I mean, man, I remember when the trailer first hit for this film, I was thinking like, wow, it's kind of ballsy to to do a World War II film, okay, and have the main characters be essentially the Nazis, okay, be the German side. I mean, I think the big problem is that as Americans, we've become so accustomed with these World War II films being about the American forces that a story about German soldiers who are in support of Hitler seems a little odd. And I was still left, you know what I mean?
It's a, pardon my French, it's a ballsy move to make Nazis your sympathetic characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you need a star in that role, because straight away you have that love for your leading man, Dolph, in this case. So it makes it a little bit easier. But nevertheless, you're watching this film and the trials and tribulations the crew are having, and you're thinking, this isn't a man on a mission movie where I want this man to succeed.
Yeah.
You know, if you're watching an old film, Kelly's Heroes, Clint Eastwood, we're rooting for those guys to get across enemy lines and get into that bank. I'm not rooting for Dolph's characters to set missiles off at New York, although I did think that would have been a great twist ending if Stephen Luke had gone the whole Quentin Tarantino route from Inglourious Bastards and said, I'm just going to change history.
Oh, do revisionist history, yeah.
Yeah, you know, let's end this film with Dolph riding on the shoulders of his men and Frank Grillo's character just in the war room holding his head in his hands going, what the hell have they done? But again, the budget was never going to allow for that, and Stephen Luke's not Quentin Tarantino. I'm guessing he's not going to risk an ending like that.
Yeah, it's just, I think we've both said it. It is odd, and you almost half wonder if maybe Stephen Luke came in possession of a submarine set or, you know, like a submarine prop and then decided to kind of squeeze a movie out of that. You know what I mean? But in the end, the film, I don't know if you felt this way or not, but the film is pretty inconsequential. I mean, I get what Stephen Luke was trying to do with this script. Okay, I in my opinion, at least, it seems like he's trying to illustrate how the German forces were fighting to the very end, even with the odds stacked against them. Okay, and they knew they were going to lose the war. I mean, it was very clear to them that they were going to lose the war, and so he just kind of wanted to illustrate the futile attempt by the German soldiers to do what they felt they needed to do. I will say, I mean, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I don't know about you. I actually did enjoy this film. How do I say this? I liked it more than Come Out Fighting. I pretty much, in the end, when I finished it, I pretty much thought about it the same way I knew I was going to think about it, but I did like it more than Come Out Fighting. And I think the big reason for that is, I think Dolph. Okay, Dolph is in this film so much more than I thought he'd be. I think we can say he's pretty much the main character of the film. I mean, he's trying with what he's been given. And what's really interesting is, look, I get that action stars tend to have it difficult in Hollywood, arguably maybe even more so than comedians who attempt to branch out and try drama. Okay, because with action stars branching into different genres, it's almost even more challenging than that. And I get that he wants to try other roles, he wants to try other genres. But again, with a presence like him, okay, with a presence like Dolph, especially in a World War II set film, you almost expect at least one action sequence. Yes. Okay, just one. Or one scene where he really lets loose and exerts his dominance. Only in this film, he's playing at one speed the entire film, man. Okay, this entire film, he is playing tired, drunk, and laconic. I mean, he never snaps alive at any moment in this film.
No, and I was waiting for that. Like you say, when there was the threat of the insurrection, and I'm thinking, yeah, Dolph's going to come down on him with the wrath of God. No, we get none of that. And I can see that he wants to move away from that. He's not the young man he used to be, and I suppose if he's looking to extend his career, he's moving away from action roles to something a little bit more dramatic, which I would fully support him in. And it was lovely to see a film where it's all Dolph. He's the main character in this. And even though I noticed online, Come Out Fighting is rated quite a little bit higher than this one. For me, this was the better film.
Okay.
But I'll admit
so it's
my
not
bias.
Just me. Okay.
Yeah. As a Dolph fan, this one was the better one for me. But I just wanted him to have a little bit more spark in his performance. He was good in parts, but there was just moments where I felt he should have been more enthused, and it never seemed to come across. But if I was going to watch one of the two again, it would be this one.
Well, it's really interesting because he does make quite an entrance in this film, where he wakes up drunk and then stumbles to the bathroom to throw up after showing his rear end. And so it's like, wow, Dolph, like you decided to go bare for this particular movie for that particular scene. It's not the most flattering, but okay. But I mean, if we look at the plot of this one, I already kind of said it, but Dolph's character is Hans Kessler. He is chosen to lead a crew of young German soldiers to launch an attack on U.S. soil in the final days of World War II. We later find out that he was chosen because they knew that the war was going to be lost on their end, and they basically needed a commander with nothing to lose, who they knew was going to be content with dying. There is, I will admit, there is kind of an unintentionally funny scene early in the film. It's when Dolph is being briefed for his mission, and all of the soldiers say, Heil Hitler, except for Dolph's character. So if you notice, they all throw their arm up and they all say that, and then Dolph does not. And so you half wonder, like, was that Dolph's insistence, or was that Stephen Luke saying, well, we need to make this character somewhat sympathetic? I don't know. I mean, it's clearly Dolph has zero issues playing a German soldier, but look, in the end, he's not going to be caught on camera raising his arm and saying that.
As you say, it makes his character appear more sympathetic. So it maybe that was on the page, or maybe it's something Dolph's decided when it was time to put it on screen. For me,
I'm not doing that.
For me, the funny moment was when he met his crew, and they're all lined up, and Dolph looks at them and says, they're all boys. And Sean, I'm 49 years old, and there was a guy on the end. I'm sure he's got 5 years on me. Bald spot, middle-aged spread. And I just thought, if Dolph thinks that's a boy, I don't think he should be in charge of a submarine. His eyesight must be gone. But again, it almost seemed like the script was there, and then maybe Stephen Luke knows a lot of people who've got these costumes from reenactments, and they've just gone, that's the script. We need 10 guys in these uniforms, or 10 of my friends have got them, or 20 of my friends have got them. And they just rock up, and they don't think to change the script to, they're just young boys and old men. But yeah, it just made me laugh as the camera panned down, and I just thought, no, that guy's got about as much chance of seeing 30 again as I have. It's never going to happen. But yeah, they're all young boys.
I mean, in the end, I think that's something else we can agree on, is this film is basically one or maybe two notches above being a college theater production. I think we can say, you know what I mean? But what's interesting is you already said it, actually. Even Dolph's scenes in the submarine never really come to life, okay? Because in the end, the film pretty much hits the same beats, okay, for all 80 minutes. Hans and his crew are taking the sub deeper into waters, launching missiles at various opponents, celebrating when something is hit, groaning when they miss, rinse and repeat. Okay, it's pretty much that same thing over and over. What's really interesting here is Dolph gets an and credit. Okay, he's third billed, even though, like we said, He does get the most screen time of everyone in this film. Frank Grillo, we should say, is also in this film as a commander for the American forces. His character is aware of the Germans' intent with the submarine, so he's sending orders over for his forces to be prepared. I will say about Frank Grillo, I mean, look, he's a dependable actor who I normally love seeing in these type of films. When I first heard that he was going to be in this film with Dolph, I got pretty excited because the idea of a team-up movie with Dolph and Frank Grillo sounds great. Unfortunately, they never share a scene on screen. I'd be willing to bet that they weren't even on set those same days. I mean, all of Frank Grillo's scenes are pretty much him in an office looking over maps and delivering orders. Okay.
Sean, I bet Grillo wasn't on set for 2 days for this movie.
I was going to guess a day. They filmed all of his scenes in one day because he does literally nothing in this film other than sitting over a desk staring at maps. That's all he does. I don't think
he even had to learn a script because they're always passing him folders or he's got a map in front of him. And I thought, I bet his lines are just on that folder. We're just not seeing it. He's whether it's a favour or whether he's crammed it in a day. It's such a shame. You know, as you say, you see the cover of this film and you're thinking, oh, there'll be Dolph and there'll be Frank Grillo. They're both great. And Grillo seems to be settling into that sort of role, that level himself as an actor, doesn't he? If he's in a big film, that's great. And if not, he's just going to show up for 2 or 3 days and cash the checks. And he seems to be too young in his career for doing that. But then again, I'm sure if somebody offered me a nice amount of cash for 1 day's work, I'd take it myself. But
oh yeah, $350,000 for 2 days worth of work. Done. I'll put on a costume and sit behind the desk and look tough. You know what I mean? Like, so I will say, when I finished watching this particular film, I sat back a bit and I kind of thought to myself, you know, what's frustrating is what they could have done with this film is there's a really cool dichotomy between Dolph's character and Frank Grillo's character. I don't know if you noticed this or not.
Yes.
But both characters are older commanders nearing retirement who are true to their nation's causes, but also tired of the futility of the war, I think we can say. I think they could have done something really cool with that. Unfortunately, their characters never really meet in the middle, nor does this idea really get fleshed out further. But I mean, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, man, it would have been kind of cool if they did meet up at the end and they shared a drink or something like that. And they kind of had that moment. But I mean, you can see, I mean, I don't know if that's what Stephen Luke was going for, but you can see that there's some parallels between these two characters that the film could have really done something with.
Yeah, if they could have had Grillo on set for 4 or 5 days and expanded his performance, and then maybe end the film with Dolph surrendering. He's not going to risk the lives of these young sailors. They've learned to trust him. They know he's got their best interests at heart. And that's how we end the film. Dolph surrenders, and the last scene is him and Grillo sitting, meeting, little bit of mutual respect. It only needs to be a 30-second film.
Bingo.
Yeah. Because I don't know about you, I still get excited about seeing two big actors on screen together.
At the same time, occupying the same space, yeah.
I'm as excited now as I was as a teenager seeing Dolph and Jean-Claude together, you know, or Pacino and De Niro, Eastwood and Reynolds. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that Grillo and Dolph Lundgren together would be the diner scene from Heat, obviously. But it would have just been a nice touch at some point if we could have got those characters together. But obviously that would have involved a little bit more development for Grillo's character and a few more days on set. And I'm guessing the production just didn't have the funds to stretch to that.
No.
What is giving a little bit of credit, if I may?
Yeah.
The submarine setting, I actually thought was not too bad.
Yes.
I mean, if we looking at Blackwater
or Agent Red
straight out of that film, yeah, because you know it was the world's biggest submarine. The corridors were huge, and it took me out of it so much I couldn't enjoy the film. At least on this one, I did feel like we're on a submarine. There's not a lot I can say in support of this film, but at least the set was okay. And the CGI, by the standards of these productions, the CGI was passable.
Well, you've actually, Steve, you actually have hit upon two of my 2 points that I made in my notes as well. Is first of all, I think I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think the CGI is. I mean, if you compare this again to Blackwater, okay, the underwater CGI is pretty passable, I will say. You know what I mean? I'm assuming there's got to be some stock footage sequences in this particular film, but I will say what Stephen Luke does and what the editing team does is they do interweave it fairly seamlessly throughout this particular film. Okay, so I mean, if you take a look at it, I mean, yeah, there's various battleships and fighter jets and things like that, but they all blend in pretty seamlessly with the film to where you look at it and you think, okay, if that is stock footage, it doesn't glare out like it does in some particular films. You know what I mean? And I will say too, I think that, in my opinion at least, I think one of the reasons too why this film is better than Come Out Fighting is, again, because of that. How do I say this? Because of the limited scope in terms of the set. I feel like if you're going to have a small set, okay, a confined set being a submarine, then you can do more with that than you can the 2 acres of land that Come Out Fighting is set on. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the reasons why why Operation Seawolf edges out the other one.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's quite a claustrophobic film. And that must be far easier to do on a small budget than to try and get big battle scenes like you'd expect to see in a Saving Private Ryan on the budget they would have had for Come Out Fighting. Yeah, this is the better film. Although looking online, nobody else agrees. It's just you and I tilting at windmills.
Well, I think combined with you and I, we're probably 30 people that have actually gone on record reviewing this film. So, but what is interesting about this film is how there really isn't a villain per se, which again, kind of going with what we said earlier with making the main characters essentially Nazis is a pretty bold, creative and artistic choice. What's very, very puzzling to me about this film is how the actor Hiram Murray is also in this film. So this guy gets top billing here. Okay, so Hiram Murray gets top billing above Frank Grillo, above Dolph Lundgren, yet he gets the least to do in this film. Basically, he's in charge of these airstrikes on the Americans' behalf. But Steve, let's be honest, you could take this character out of the film entirely and it's going to play just fine, perhaps even better, because as soon as it's kind of like you're watching it and you're like, why are we focused on the air assault when it's about a submarine? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I wondered if Stephen Luke has, because I've noticed a few of the actors pop up in both films. And I can only assume he's like one of these directors who has people he likes to work with. And if he can get you a big role in this film, that's great. And if there'll be a small role for you in the next one. And I think Murray is involved in the production side as well, isn't he? I'm sure I saw his name in the credits as one of the producers. So I can only assume that gives him a bit of pull to get himself a role. But I was watching the scenes with him in, and there's a crewman saying he wants to see his mother again, and yeah, I'll get you home. But then nothing. And as you say, you'd lose nothing by taking that character out of the film. It almost seems like we've got him for 2 or 3 scenes and it'll stretch the running time out from 84 minutes to 87. Other than that, I just couldn't see what was achieved by having that character on there at all. Again, I would rather have had another 3 or 4 minutes of Ingram, Grillo's character, but I'm guessing it's cheaper to put Murray on the screen than Frank Grillo. But obviously, without seeing their paychecks, I couldn't swear to it, but that's my assumption that there's just not enough money to keep the big cast around, so we make the most of what we've got. But they could have had more time with Dolph and Reinhardt if necessary to pad the film out. I just, as you say, that the Murray character, unfortunately, he adds nothing at all to the film.
Well, what's interesting, if in Come Out Fighting, we're going to be getting to that, but there is also a character in Come Out Fighting that, sticks out almost annoyingly, like this particular character does, that we'll get to. But if we finish this film off, okay, we're getting into spoiler territory here, Steve, but Dolph's Han's character does die at the end. He insists on dying with his ship because, quote unquote, he states, a true captain must be willing to die with his ship. I guess that makes sense. But that is how the film ends. You pretty much know going in that they lost the war, and it seems like the Germans knew that they were going to lose in these final days. But that's how Operation Seawolf, that's how the film ends.
And I know that was history repeating for Dolph's character with what happened at the start of the film. But I just wish he could have gone with the crew. Just his character to go, no, I don't need to repeat this cycle. That the war's futile. I can have a life beyond this. And again, that could have led to Kessler having a meeting with Ingram, or at least Murray's character. But I suppose maybe it doesn't play as dramatic. And that's why they've left it how they've left, or how they filmed it. But yeah, it's a shame, really. But it is what it is. It passes an hour and a half, but it's not one I could really recommend to anyone who's not a diehard Dolph fan.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's get to the second of this duo. Okay, so we're moving on now to Come Out Fighting. Okay. In this one, also written and directed by Stephen Luke, a squad of African-American soldiers must battle not just a relentless army of German soldiers, but also adversity as they go behind enemy lines to find their commanding officer. Lundgren takes on a backseat role for this one as a major who looks the other way at the plans set forth by the brash American team under his command.
Mayday! Going down!
You are the first Negro tankers to ever fight in the American Army. Everyone has their eyes on you. Don't let them down.
Attack!
Whoa! You don't hear that?
We're under attack! We're falling back into the woods!
Major, you heard about them. We got to go rescue them.
We cannot go charging off for some rescue operation. Hayes is a smart man. If he's still alive, he'll find a way to make it back.
Get down!
I've never been too fond of taking orders.
The hell with orders. We're gonna find Hayes and bring him back.
We can't stay here. I'll cover you. Go!
You a pilot?
I was until I was shot down. Maybe I'm the one that's rescuing you.
This don't look good. You got 24 hours. Find Hayes and bring him back. If you find an American pilot out there, bring him back as well. Don't let me down, Sergeant. Good luck. Hell of a way to fight a war.
These are the real men out here. Real men that'll put it all on the line. Real killers.
Here they come.
Like I said earlier, man, I was surprised. Okay, I actually thought that I was going to like this one better than I did Seawolf. Okay, again, mainly due to the cast. I did look online. the 761st Tank Battalion. That's the film, or excuse me, that is the I guess unit that this film is loosely based on. You can find various like short documentaries about the 761st on YouTube. It seemed like a kind of a cool concept. But I will say right now, I think Seawolf again manages to have an edge over Come Out Fighting because again, Seawolf is more contained. Okay, and so because it is contained, it is able to maximize its budget and its short shooting time so much more. This particular film, I'm just going to say it now, Steve, with Come Out Fighting, all Come Out Fighting is just people running around a forest in costume for 80 minutes. That's basically what this film is.
And I think the last film, a small set doesn't allow for so many continuity errors. I mean, at the start of the film, there's the scene where Muddy's character, Hayes, he leaves his men to clear the minefield. He seems to be about 50 feet from them. And then when the Nazis start attacking, he's running from miles away.
Yeah, I know.
You watch it going, have I missed something? I know I didn't fall asleep, but he was not that far from his line. And then Michael Jai White, how far can that man throw a hand grenade? It just, the whole thing. And, I really, if Stephen Luke's listening, I feel so bad, because I'm sure this was a labour of love and he's done the best he can. But that whole scene at the beginning took me straight out of the film. Mm-hmm. I know it's ridiculous to criticise action movies for their realism, but this isn't an action movie in the sense of The Fast and the Furious or John Wick. It's a war film. I expect it to be a little bit more grounded. I mean, have the Nazis sat in that field watching the American troops and not fired on them because they've thought, we'll wait till some more get here? Or have they just arrived as well and that whole platoon didn't hear 40, 50 Nazi vehicles rolling up alongside them? It was just dire.
Yeah. That was one of my notes and complaints as well. You said it, is the villains. Okay. The villains of this film are these nondescript German soldiers who are just inexplicably also in the forest at all times. You know what I mean? And so there's really no scene of them, approaching things or them hearing the tanks roll up and they decide, okay, now we got to make our attack. They're just in the forest. I mean, in the end, the whole thing, like I said, just feels, it basically is one of those war reenactments or whatever that inexplicably has cameras on them. You know what I mean? I know that a lot of people like to do, I don't know if they are over in England or not, but here in America, we have Civil War reenactments all the time and things of that nature in forests or whatever. I do not personally partake in any of that, but
Sean, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. If that's what you like, you tell
me.
But
I mean that's what this film feels like. Is it just feels like a reenactment that they figured, hey, you know what? Let's get some cameras on this, and we're going to film it and kind of eke out a story. But yeah, I said the same thing too. I was like, why are the Germans in the forest? Okay, and the other thing too, and this is a silly criticism to make, Steve. I understand this is a completely silly criticism to make. But it never feels like World War II because of the setting, okay? And I said this back when we discussed War Pigs, but I will say, when it comes to World War II set films, I feel like when you film in Europe, that just adds a layer of texture and feel to the proceedings. And obviously, they cannot afford Europe. I get that, but the forest that this film is filmed in, just, you can tell it's American soil, and it's like, this doesn't feel like World War II in any way.
I think even if there could have been like and again, I accept the budget, but even if they could have filmed where they filmed, but built like the remains of a bombed out town, just something to make you feel like you're in a war zone rather than just having a walk in the woods.
A walk in the woods, yeah.
Yeah. But no, there was even the characters. I think you can get away in a war film with having a character mowing down nondescript Nazis like Eastwood and Burton did in Where Eagles Dare. But the characters weren't strong enough in this film on the good side. So if you don't feel that attachment to those characters, it's hard to care what they're doing and what they're up against. And it was such a shame because, again, you look at the cover, you go, oh, well, we've got Lundgren, we've got White. I'll be honest, I had no familiarity with Murray before watching these films, but we've got Jai White, we've got Kellen Lutz. That's quite a good action background history for those guys. You know, altogether, this should be something on the lines of a low-budget Expendables set in World War II, and it's nothing like. And I've watched this film 3 times.
3? Wow.
3 times, Sean. In fact, both films I've watched 3 times. I watched them when they came out. I watched them when you initially proposed me being a guest. And then I watched them again this week because I thought, if having heard Stephen Luke on your podcast, I wanted to find something in them where I could say, this bit was brilliant, or this was the redeeming feature of this film. And my wife was laughing because she watched 10 minutes and she said, I bet you Dolph's family haven't watched this 3 times, Steve. But no,
even
I
Dolph
really
hasn't watched it once. Let's be honest. Even Dolph hasn't watched it once. I mean, if you look at these films, you look at them, and at least here in the U.S., I don't know how it was across the pond in your area, but in the U.S., Shout Factory, okay, they picked up Operation Seawolf, okay. Shout Factory is kind of one of the remaining indie companies or indies distributors, labels who will put out these type of films, okay. And so I remember, I mean, again, Dolph shot both of these films back to back. Stephen Luke made them both back to back, okay. And the Shout Factory snagged this one, snatched it right up for distribution and release pretty quickly after it had commenced filming. Okay. And so you watch it and you're thinking like, okay, that's interesting. Okay. But then Come Out Fighting, that one took a little bit to finally get a release. Okay. And then it finally did. And so you watch these two and when you hear that, you're thinking, well, what was it about the one that they saw and then they turned down the other? And it's very clear. I mean, it's very clear. I mean, at least with Operation Seawolf, that one at least sustained my interest. Okay, say what you will about it, but at least sustained my interest. Okay, to where I was able to sit through and watch it, from beginning to end. This particular film, Come Out Fighting, man, my mind started to wander. I got bored. I mean, it was the same thing my wife was in, and she was like, I had it on in the background, and she kind of looked up, and she was like, what? Like, there's another battle in the forest again? Didn't this just happen like 20 minutes ago?
And this film, unlike the other one, the CGI was so bad, it took you out of the film more as well.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not saying any amount of good effects would have saved this movie, but the explosions are going off, but the grass isn't moving, or and I'm so sorry, Mr. Luke, but the Germans pop up from nowhere again. We have the same thing when Hayes is put with the racist platoon. He's the only one that hears anything, and then even he doesn't hear the tanks till at about 12 feet away. I mean, I've never been in a war zone, but I'm assuming if I'm in a forest and there's a platoon of tanks heading my way, I'd like to think I'd hear it with more than 10 seconds warning. It was everything seemed to happen because it's got to happen because we've got to get this. We need the tanks here because we need Hayes to get separated from these guys. Oh, Sean, it was maybe watching it 3 times has sent me around the deep end, but this film, it's bottom of the barrel in Dolph's career. It really is.
Well, here's what's really interesting is, I mean, I already said it, but yeah, I guess Stephen Luke, he loosely based this film on the 761st Tank Battalion, okay, which was a squad of African-American soldiers who were in this particular tank and going behind enemy lines or, in World War II, okay. Really, really cool story. I will admit that is a great idea if they wanted to flesh that out. Unfortunately, the whole tank, okay, story angle really never comes into play until about the final 40 minutes or so. And there's not a heck of a lot of tank action when it finally does come into play. And so you're kind of like, well, what was the point of including that anyway? I think the one thing that we can agree on, though, is that this film has a great cast. I mean, if you just run down the list, we have Michael Jai White, Tyrese Gibson, Dolph. We haven't really talked about his role in this film, but he plays the major, okay, of the squad. His name is Major Chase Anderson. What's really interesting here is he's basically playing the same type of role as Frank Grillo in that Frank Grillo did in Seawolf, where basically he's sitting behind a desk looking at maps and giving orders. That's pretty much it. I will say he does get slightly more to do. I mean, for one, he has a wicked scar running down the side of his face, which is kind of cool. I will say that his acting here is pretty good. He does get a pretty comical scene where he gets to have an exchange with an actor who is ostensibly playing General Patton. I thought that was kind of funny.
And was it me, or could they not have found anyone that looked less like General Patton than the actor they got? Was that my imagination?
No. Like, and it begged the question for me: why make a General Patton then?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Short of casting Gibson or Jai White as General Patton, I don't think they could have found anyone less like General Patton. But it was a comical scene. I think that was probably my favorite scene of the movie.
I think we can say Hiram Murray is, again, in this film. He is, once again, I think we can say the lead, where he's top billed. Or maybe is he top billed, or is it Kellen Lutz who's top billed? Now I think about it. I'll have to...
Muddy is essentially the lead, isn't he? He certainly gets the most screen time.
He's the lieutenant in charge of this squad who is caught behind enemy lines, which, again, once he's caught behind enemy lines, that spurs Michael Jai White into action. So he teams up with Tyrese Gibson. Tyrese Gibson is the leader of this tank unit, and they decide to go in and rescue their friend, their teammate, their soldier, I guess we could say. What's interesting is, Tyrese Gibson, he doesn't really come into this film until about 50 minutes in, maybe. Yeah, and
the halfway point. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, and what's interesting? Okay, so we talked about how in Operation Seawolf, there's this character that you can lift out that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. Well, if you look at Come Out Fighting, we get a pretty similar MO here. Okay, so I don't know if you felt this way or not, but Kellen Lutz pops up in this film. He is a fighter pilot whose plane was shot down, and so he teams up with Hiram Murray, and the two must put aside their differences in order to survive, because both of them are behind enemy lines. So I don't know if you felt this way or not, but with Kellen Lutz, his inclusion almost hurts this film in a similar way as Hiram Murray's inclusion hurt Seawolf, okay? Because he's gone for such a long stretch of time that you forget he's even a part of the film. And then when he does pop up, you're kind of like, oh, wait a minute. That's right, he was in this movie, wasn't he? I mean, and so it's wild, because once him and Murray team up, okay, I will say the relationship between the two characters is okay. It's fine. But again, that could almost be its own movie. Okay, you have these two characters, okay, one who's white, the other who's black, who are both behind enemy lines, and they have to put aside their differences to survive. I think that's a cool story. That right there could be its own movie. But then you have all this other ancillary stuff, okay, going on. You have Michael Jai White and the Tank Battalion. You have Dolph Lundgren, who's this major who's trying to get on General Patton's good side. And so you have this one little subplot that is shoehorned into a film that is ostensibly about a legendary tank battalion. And so it's kind of like, what are we doing here? What is the story that we want to tell here?
It almost seemed to me like they'd offered Lutz a role in the film. He couldn't do it. They've recast. They've put whoever in the role. And then somebody's gone, oh, yeah, Lutz is available. Oh, what can we do? Oh, yeah, let get him pretending to be a pilot, and then we'll team him up here later on. As you say, there was no reason for that character to be in the film. The only thought I had was when they won't sanction Jai White doing a rescue operation until there's a pilot involved, and maybe it goes towards the racism that existed at the time as well, that they would rather do the mission for a white soldier than a black one. But other than that, there was no reason for that character to be in that film. He didn't do anything. He come across as a little bit of a clown when he's making a noise walking through the woods. And I know he wasn't ground troops, he was a pilot, but you would still think they'd have had some common sense given there's Germans behind every tree in that forest. It must be the most well-patrolled 3 acres of Europe in any war, because you couldn't step 10 feet without walking on a Nazi, could you, in these scenes? But no, I'd have happily seen Lutzi's character out of the film. Nevertheless, when I see him on a box and I think back to some of the other films he's been in, I think, yeah, this is a guy who knows his way around a fight scene. We're in for a good time. And obviously that wasn't the case.
Well, I will say about this particular film, I mean, it loves to lay on, perhaps pretty heavy-handedly, I think, the glory and the heroism of war. I mean, man, and I will say a lot of that is due to the score. The score comes in quite a bit with this film. I mean, but man, it really likes to lay on the fact that these guys are heroes and everything, you know, which is fine. I mean, that's what World War II epic type films did. But I mean, the stakes of the film never really come to life, I will say. And again, I think considering the film's limitations, it all really kind of comes off pretty lackluster. I mean, there are multiple issues that I had with this film, I think, that we've talked about. But I think my biggest issue with this particular film, and again, God bless Stephen Luke for trying. God bless everyone for trying the best with what they were given. But again, there was a reason why Shout Factory snatched up Operation Seawolf and then said, we're okay leaving this one behind. There is a reason why Shout Factory took Operation Seawolf and this particular film sat for a bit until Redbox, at least here in the States, Redbox finally snatched this particular film up out of everyone. And I think that's because, I mean, this film is just so cheap, okay? The costumes and the props are all good. The battle scenes, explosions, and moments of excitement, I'll put that in quotes, are staged fairly well. But you know, kind of like what I said with Operation Seawolf. I mean, the stock footage, again, is woven in fairly seamlessly to where you have to wonder, okay, which of this is real and which of this did Stephen Luke insert in the editing process. But in the end, okay, when you really break it down with what's on screen for these 86 minutes, 100% of this film is shot in a forest, maybe about 2 acres, I think we can say, 3 acres. Yeah. So what we have in the end are dozens of extras playing war in a reenactment setting. And I think that's why Seawolf actually manages to edge this one out slightly, because Seawolf, like we said earlier, is so much more confined with it being set on a submarine that you believe for those 86 minutes that it's World War II. Here, for this film's 86-minute runtime, I never once got the feel and vibe that this was World War II.
Also, I never got the feeling that any of the main cast were in danger in this film.
No stakes.
I never expected anything to happen to Murray, but the Lutz character, I mean, considering I've watched it 3 times, I can't remember, but I don't think any of their platoon were shot, were they, in the film? I don't think anybody died. I don't remember anyone on the good side, so to speak, being shot in this film, which maybe would have made it more interesting if they'd got Murray back, but one of his colleagues had died in rescuing him. Maybe that would have given it some gravitas. But as you say, the impression was just you're watching some guys spending their Saturday afternoon entertaining themselves, playing war in a field with some dramatic music going on in the background. And it was such a shame given the cast. But I certainly don't think, for example, Gibson, when he's on the set of Fast and Furious 11, he'll be saying to Vin Diesel and Jason Statham, have you seen my latest film yet? I've got a copy of the DVD in my trailer. I think he'll just forget all about this, and I'm sure the rest of them involved will go the same way. I'm not sure it's going on anybody's CV.
It's really weird. I mean, that's, if I may, if we can go off on a quick side tangent, but I mean, it's really kind of bizarre when you think about it, how, okay, you and I have our respective jobs, okay, our careers, okay, but then these actors like Lundgren and Michael J. White and Tyrese Gibson and all of them, I mean, this is their career, okay, and it's just really interesting how you and I have fairly mundane days at our respective jobs. And then with them, like, these are jobs for these particular guys as well. And so, yeah, you bring up a really good point. It's like, man, like, do you think at the end, like 3 years from now, are even the actors themselves going to remember making these particular films? Or are they kind of like you and I? Like, I couldn't tell you what I did 2 weeks ago at work. You know what I mean? Like, if you asked me, hey, Sean, what did you do at work 3 Wednesdays ago? I couldn't remember. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's in a weird way for a $2 million production that each of these films are. Is that the same way with each of these guys? Is Tyrese Gibson not even going to remember making this particular film multiple years down the line?
I'm sure none of them will. I mean, in fact, occasionally I can bump into somebody I've worked with briefly years ago, and I need my memory jogging that I know that person, and I'm guessing Dolph or Tyrese Gibson could bump into some of the other actors off these sets in 12 months' time and not remember they were on a film together. You know, I'm sure that they're rushed in, rushed out. I mean, Gibson, again, I'm sure his scenes were shot within 2 or 3 days. He doesn't have a great deal to do. He looks very emotional in the last scene of the film. He seems to be trying harder than everybody else, maybe, or maybe he thinks he's in a different movie. But no, I'm sure none of these guys are going to remember this. And as you said about the last one, chances are none of them are ever going to put their feet up at home and put this DVD on, are they?
No. I will say with both of these films, and I said something very similar with War Pigs. I think both of these films, they do have their heart in the right place. Yes. Okay. And again, and I'm not just saying this because I spoke with Stephen Luke, but I mean, I feel like it's very clear that these were made by someone who's extremely passionate about this era. The big issue, I mean, we keep coming back to it, is that despite the seamless stock footage that is woven into the films, they end up, they come off looking pretty cheap, come out fighting more so than Operation Seawolf. I think with the wickedly short running times, you do half wonder if there were really even scripts assembled in the first place. That's the one thing that I kept coming back to with these. I mean, again,
sorry to interrupt, Sean. There was a scene where Jai White's character says, "We're going at night, 1100." And again, that took me out for a second because I'm thinking, well, the military use a 24-hour clock. Has he improvised this line? And I did actually go and look this up, and the military started using a 24-hour clock in 1942.
Okay.
I'm thinking, well, Stephen Luke's the war historian. He would have known this. But then I started thinking to myself, well, no, maybe Jai White's character's an older soldier. He's maybe not been using this jargon. It's only been in play a year or two. But it still took me out of it. I thought it would have been easier just to say, we're going at 2300. It just seemed like maybe the script wasn't tight enough. And for somebody who is a World War II historian, not to pick up on that during, there was just so many little things like that took you out of it. But at the same time, nobody sets out to make a bad movie. And I'm sure everyone involved, behind the scenes has done their best. I'm sure all the actors, even though it's just a routine day for them, have come on and hit their marks and done their best with what they've been given. It's just a pity at the way it turned out, isn't it?
Well, you do have to wonder, and I don't want to, I'm not throwing shade at anyone by saying this, but you do have to wonder, okay, if Stephen Luke, kind of like what we said, you wonder if, again, maybe there were scripts in place, but if they were kind of going on the fly, you know what I mean? I would not be surprised. I mean, let's face it, Stephen Luke has this prop company. And so I kind of wonder if the production decided, hey, you know what, let's use the materials from our prop warehouses. Okay. And then we will make a movie, okay, using these props, but then we can write it off as a business expense. Yes, okay. So we get a little bit of a tax write-off in the end. I think Come Out Fighting is the most egregious of this, because despite those explosions and the props on display, what we're watching in that film is just a collection of props running through about 2 to 3 acres of forest, which is inexplicably masquerading as a movie. But in the end, I'm glad that we were able to discuss these particular films, and I'm really glad that you agreed not just to come on, but to watch both of these films, and you were willing to discuss them. So, Steve, thank you very, very much, man.
Sean, thank you. I don't get the chance to talk Dolph with many people because even my good friends, they like their action films, but they like John Wick level action films. I feel like I'm in a minority of one, being a fan of straight to streaming low budget fare. So it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about them.
Well, I don't know if you heard an analogy that I made in a previous episode, but I'm actually pretty proud of this one. But but what's interesting is, I mean, we don't really, I mean, oh man, as we approach 2024, it is going to be interesting to see what the independent action films look like. Okay, because up to this point, all right, we had a few diamonds in the rough. Okay, I think Section 8 was okay considering. I mean, but that was, I mean, man, compared to some of these other ones, I think I used the term, frozen pizza. Okay, I mean, because again, you have the John Wick and you have the Fast and the Furious. That's what's coming to the box office in terms of action films. But then when you go below that, okay, to the direct-to-video stuff that pops up on streaming or whatever, not a lot of it is pretty good, but then you have ones that are edible, I will say, like frozen pizza. I don't know if these particular films even can, if they can even be considered as being edible, but yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here in the next couple of years. I have a theory that we may not see any more here in the next couple of years, but who knows?
No, there doesn't seem to be that happy medium anymore, does there? I mean, years ago, you had your Lethal Weapon levels, but even your straight-to-video, as was back in the day, they looked like they'd had a little bit of time spent on them. These days, they're churned out so quick, so cheap. You seem to go from an 80 million John Wick or $200 million Fast and Furious to, as you say, 2 million come out fighting. Lads, we've got 17 days to get this in the can. Away we go. And I just wish there could be a market for that $20-30 million action film like we used to see when we were younger. It's such a shame.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, is there anything that you want to give a shout out to or mention, or what's going on?
Well, I'm on the chance that you may be listening, I'd just like to say to Mr. Lundgren, although we've spent the last hour plus ripping your latest films apart, I'm wishing you well. I'm hoping your films next year do well. The new one in particular, I forget the name, that's terrible, but it seems to have vibes of The Gauntlet.
The Wanted Man.
That's the one. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, and I just hope that next year we're seeing Dolph have a little bit of a renaissance. I was hoping that a role in Aquaman Lost Kingdom would do that for him, but looking at the box office projections for that film, I'm not sure how much that's going to add to Dolph's reputation and bankability, but hopefully just more films for Dolph and we get a few more classics before he's done.
Well, Steve, this has been the ultimate pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. And you sent in your thoughts regarding Expendables 4, so I agreed with you completely there. So thank you for doing that as well.
As an aside, I think there's a market for a medium budget with the Expendables. Get Dolph in the lead. You'd need Stallone in it for one scene. He's going on holiday and he mentioned Statham's on his honeymoon, and then put Dolph in. He recruits for another mission, and I think that could be the way forward for that franchise. It's never going to have a future now as a cinematic franchise, but I think on streaming or DVD, I think that could be the way forward for that.
Well, the last film was essentially a direct-to-video sequel as well that inexplicably went theatrical. So yeah, definitely. I think there's certainly a market for it that way. Yeah.
I think you'd have to explain Statham's absence, but that's doable. And there's enough old guys out there and younger guys who've maybe not established their action movie chops yet. But I think with Dolph there and with Couture there, you've got guys like Lamas and Mateus Hughes, a couple of younger actors, you could essentially make a film about old guys having to bring youngsters on and go on a mission. You could still spend some money on the effects. You just wouldn't need Stallone in more than 2 scenes to bookend the film. And I think that the hardcore that go to see Expendables would still see it. It's just there's not enough of us hardcore to justify spending $100 million on it anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, again, Steve, this has been the ultimate pleasure. Thank you again for joining me, and to everyone out there who is listening. Please feel free to rate and review the show on iTunes or wherever you go to subscribe. We always appreciate the reviews, and we'll see you all next time on I Must Break This Podcast.